It happened during a quiet dinner with my roommates. The clinking of forks and soft laughter wrapped around the room. Until my phone buzzed. 8 words froze me in place. Leave now. Don't tell your parents what you found. My heart slammed against my ribs. The message came from an unknown number, but the tone felt intimate. This afternoon I had stumbled upon a sealed envelope in my father's locked drawer. I never finished reading it. Now every cell in my body screamed one question. Who knew? And what would happen if I stayed? When I was younger, I used to believe that all families were like ours, full of noisy Sunday breakfasts, birthday cakes on time, and photo albums stacked in the living room. But over the years, I learned to read the gaps in between those moments. My brother Ethan, 2 years younger than me, was the sun we all orbited around. He was loud, charming, the kind of boy who never had to ask twice for what he wanted. I wasn't jealous. At least, that's what I told myself. I was the quiet one, the girl who disappeared into books and drew in the margins of her notebooks. But the difference between us was impossible to ignore. For Ethan's 16th birthday, he got a brand new car, parked proudly in the driveway, with a red bow on top. For mine, a modest dinner and a promise from Dad that your time will come. That promise stayed with me, especially because he'd whispered it like a secret. When you turn 18, I have something set aside for you, something special. At 18, I waited. At 19, I'm still waiting. It's in the little things, too. When Ethan struggled with his grades, my parents hired a tutor immediately. When I made the dean's list, they smiled politely and moved on to talk about Ethan's soccer match. He was the priority. I was the afterthought. One memory stands out. Last Thanksgiving, Ethan knocked over a glass of red wine on Mom's new rug. She laughed, told him not to worry. The following week, I accidentally broke a cheap vase, and her voice was sharp enough to cut. I used to think maybe it was me, that I just wasn't the kind of daughter who made people light up when she walked in the room. But lately, I've been collecting these moments like puzzle pieces, turning them over in my head, wondering what picture they'll form when I have them all. That's how it started. My quiet investigation into my own family. It wasn't intentional at first. It was small things. The way Aunt Marlene's smile faded when she saw me. The way Mom's eyes darted away whenever I asked about the special something Dad had promised. There was an unease I couldn't name, like an itch I couldn't scratch. Last week, I got a strange text from an unknown number. Be careful with what you saw. I deleted it immediately, assuming it was a wrong number. But the words lingered, whispering at the back of my mind. Then this afternoon, I'd been at my parents' house, alone for once. I wandered into Dad's study, a place I rarely entered. The heavy oak desk smelled faintly of tobacco and something older. Dust, maybe. On impulse, I tried the drawers. Most were locked, but the second one on the right clicked open. Inside was a sealed manila envelope with my name written neatly in black ink. My hands trembled as I slid it halfway out. Before I could read more than the first line, regarding the matter of... I heard a car door slam outside. My parents were back early. Heart pounding, I shoved the envelope back and closed the drawer. I didn't tell anyone. Not my friends. Not my roommates. I told myself I'd go back another day. But now, sitting at the dinner table, my phone buzzing with a message that mirrors the end of that unfinished letter, I can't help but feel the walls closing in. Leave now. Don't tell your parents what you found. I reread it, the words blurring as my pulse thunders in my ears. Whoever sent it knows. They know about the envelope, about me, about... Something I didn't even get the chance to understand. My roommate catches my expression and tilts her head. "You okay?" she asks, her fork pausing in midair. I force a smile, but it feels like my face might crack. "Yeah," I lie. The truth is, I'm not okay. Not even close. And for the first time, I'm starting to think my family isn't just unfair. They're hiding something. Something worth warning me about. In the days after that dinner, I buried myself in work. If I couldn't get answers, I could at least prove, somehow, that I was worthy of my family's attention. I signed up for extra shifts at the campus library, volunteered at a local shelter, joined 2 new student organizations, and stayed up late studying until my eyes burned. My calendar became a patchwork of deadlines and obligations, each square filled with a new attempt to be more. Every time I accomplished something, I imagined telling my parents, watching their faces light up. But the phone stayed silent. When I did call, Mom's voice was distracted. Dad's clipped. Their questions circled back to Ethan, his soccer stats, his new internship. One crisp autumn afternoon, my literature professor pulled me aside after class. "You have a real gift, Haley," she said, her eyes warm. "Your analysis is the kind of work I'd expect from a graduate student." The words settled into me like sunlight on cold skin. I thanked her, blinking fast, so she wouldn't see the sting in my eyes. It was ridiculous how much I craved that kind of affirmation, how rare it was to hear. That night, I sat in the common room with my roommates, trying to focus on homework. The hum of the vending machine filled the silence until Jenna, the quieter of the two, spoke. "I've been meaning to ask, have you ever gotten weird texts?" I looked up. "Weird how?" She hesitated, then pulled out her phone and showed me. It was a short message. "You should be careful. Some things aren't meant to be found." My stomach dropped. It was almost identical to the first strange text I'd deleted a week ago. "Who sent this to you?" I asked, my voice low. "I don't know," she said. "But it was right after my cousin went missing. The police said she just left. But I don't think that's the whole story." Before I could respond, my phone lit up on the table. Another unknown number. My hands shook as I unlocked it. "It's not just about the money." The words seared into me. Not just about the money. So what else was there? Over the next week, my body began to betray me. Sleep came in fragments. When it did, my dreams were filled with locked drawers and shadowed figures. My appetite vanished, replaced by the constant churn of adrenaline. The tightness in my chest followed me from lecture halls to the grocery store, an invisible weight pressing down. I kept telling myself that this was temporary, that I'd push through like I always did. But the more I tried to focus, the more my thoughts drifted back to that envelope, the texts, the uneasy way Mom avoided my gaze the last time I was home. The shift from hope to doubt was subtle but irreversible. At first, I thought my efforts would win their attention. Now I started to wonder if attention was the last thing I wanted. Late one night, I pulled out my journal and sketched the envelope I'd seen in Dad's desk, recreating the neat block letters of my name. It was then, staring at the page, that something clicked. The handwriting, the slant, the spacing, wasn't his. I'd seen Dad's signature on tax forms and report cards my whole life. This was different, precise, almost unfamiliar. I didn't know what it meant, but the realization lodged itself in my chest like a shard of glass. The next morning, my inbox pinged with a new message from an address I didn't recognize. No subject line, just an attachment. Against my better judgment, I opened it. A grainy scan appeared on the screen. A birth certificate. My birth certificate. Only the names under mother and father weren't the ones I'd known for 19 years. The birth certificate sat like a living thing in my bag, its edges curling as if trying to fold in on itself. I couldn't shake the thought that it might not be real, that some cruel stranger was playing a twisted game with me. But the feeling in my gut said otherwise. A name in the corner, Margaret Reynolds, stirred a vague memory. I'd heard my mother mention a Cousin Maggie once, in the kind of offhand tone people use when they're brushing away something they'd rather forget. I searched her online, finding a modest address 2 towns over. My hands trembled as I dialed the number I found beside it. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice cautious but not unfriendly. I told her my name. Silence stretched between us. Then she said, "You'd better come by. Some things aren't meant for the phone." Her house was small, tucked behind a hedge of wild roses. Inside, it smelled faintly of cinnamon and old books. She set 2 mugs of tea on the table, steam curling into the air. For a moment, the world outside faded, replaced by the warmth of a stranger who looked at me as though she already knew my story. "I saw your birth certificate," I said, my voice low. "Is it real?" Her eyes softened. "It's real. I was there, the day you were born." She leaned back, as if the weight of the memory pulled at her spine. "Your parents. They're not your biological parents. You were adopted, but not through the usual process. There were conditions, financial ones." The words hit like a physical blow. Adoption wasn't the shock. I'd suspected something like that since the emails. But the idea that money had been part of the deal made my stomach twist. "What kind of conditions?" Her gaze flicked to the window before she answered. "Let's just say someone was owed, and you were part of the payment." We sat in silence for a moment, sipping tea that had gone lukewarm. She told me about visiting me in the hospital when I was just a baby, about how my mother, my adoptive mother, had been pale and quiet, a man at her side who wasn't my father. Then she slid an old photograph across the table. My mother, younger, her hair loose around her shoulders, sitting up in a hospital bed. Beside her stood a tall man with sharp features, one hand resting protectively on her arm. "Do you know him?" I asked, my voice almost a whisper. Margaret's answer was a long exhale. "I think you should find out for yourself." I left her house with the photo tucked inside my coat, my mind spinning. Over the next week, I began pulling away from my family in small, deliberate ways. I stopped calling unless absolutely necessary. I told my parents I was moving out of the shared apartment into a place closer to campus. It wasn't entirely true. The new place was a tiny sublet in a building with peeling paint and questionable plumbing. But it was mine. Professor Hale, my literature mentor, noticed the change in me. After class, she pulled me aside. "You look like you're carrying more than books these days," she said gently. I didn't tell her everything, but I told her enough for her to understand that I needed space, and maybe a little guidance. She offered both without hesitation. With her help and the quiet support of my closest friends, I started practicing how to say no. No to extra responsibilities I didn't want. No to family demands that made me feel small. Each refusal was terrifying, but each one left me standing a little taller. Then, one rainy evening, my phone buzzed with a number I knew by heart. Ethan. I almost didn't answer, but something in me was curious. "They've been lying to me too," he said without preamble. His voice was low, as if he didn't want anyone to overhear. "About Dad. About other things." I sat on the edge of my bed, the photo from Margaret still on my desk. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, And in that pause I could hear the storm outside, the slow drip of water from the gutter. "If you knew who your real father was," he said finally, "you wouldn't sleep tonight." The line went dead. The sky was the color of wet concrete when I pulled into my parents' driveway. My hands gripped the steering wheel long after the engine went silent. In my bag, the birth certificate, the photograph, and the printed record of the bank transfer from my trust fund sat like live wires. I walked in without knocking. The living room smelled faintly of coffee and lemon polish, but the air felt heavy, as though it knew what was coming. My parents sat on the couch, Ethan in the armchair, all three looking up at me in varying shades of surprise and suspicion. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I laid the papers on the coffee table one by one. "This is my birth certificate. That's not your handwriting, Dad. And this," I tapped the bank record, "is proof you emptied my trust fund to cover Ethan's debt." Dad's face hardened. "Where did you get these?" "They're mine," I said, "and I think I deserve answers." Mom's eyes glistened, but she said nothing. Ethan shifted in his seat, gaze fixed on the carpet. Dad leaned back, arms crossed. "You've been snooping where you shouldn't. Those documents don't tell the whole story." "They tell enough," I shot back. "Enough to know I'm not your biological daughter." The silence that followed was deep and jagged. Finally, Mom's voice broke it. "Your father didn't want this," she whispered. "Bringing you here. It was my decision." I blinked, stunned. "What do you mean?" She clasped her hands in her lap, twisting her wedding ring. "Years ago, before you were born, I was in an accident. A man saved my life, pulled me out of a burning car. He asked for nothing in return, but when he came to me later, asking if I could take in his newborn, I couldn't say no. I felt the room tilt. And Dad? He didn't agree," she said, her voice breaking. "But I couldn't turn my back." Dad's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. I took a step back, the photograph burning in my pocket. "The man in the hospital photo, he's the one?" Mom's gaze met mine, and for a moment, it was almost like she was seeing me as I really was. Not as an intruder, not as a burden, but as the child she'd chosen. Her lips trembled. "He's still alive." The words landed like a warning and a promise all at once. I left before anyone could stop me. By the end of the week, my bank account was empty of their contributions. No more tuition payments, no more rent help. Calls from Mom went unanswered. Texts from Ethan went unread. The house that had once been my anchor now felt like a closed door I had no key for. One rainy night, I sat by my apartment window, knees tucked to my chest, watching the streetlight smear in the puddles below. My mind drifted to a memory I hadn't thought of in years. Being 7 years old, shivering after falling into the backyard pool, and Dad wrapping me in a towel, holding me until my teeth stopped chattering. That moment had felt real, solid. Now I wondered if even that had been conditional. The ping of my laptop broke the silence. A new message on social media from an account with no profile picture. "I think we should talk." Attached was the hospital photo I'd gotten from Margaret. My pulse jumped. I typed back before I could overthink it. "Who are you?" The reply came almost instantly. "We need to meet. You're not safe." Winter settled over the city in a blanket of white, muffling the noise, slowing everything down. After weeks of feeling like I was running on fumes, I finally allowed myself to stop. I found a therapist through the university's counseling center. The first few sessions were awkward. Me, staring at the floor, unsure how to untangle the knot inside me. But little by little the words came. Therapy became my anchor. I learned to meditate in the mornings, to focus on the rhythm of my breath instead of the chaos in my head. At night, I wrote in a journal, not for anyone else to read, just to hear my own voice without interruption. Pages filled with memories, questions, and quiet realizations. One morning, I woke up to find sunlight spilling across my bedroom floor. I stretched, realizing I'd slept through the night without waking. It was such a small thing, but it made me smile. Proof that maybe I was mending, however slowly. A week later, I agreed to meet him. The man from the photo. We chose a public park, the winter air sharp enough to sting my cheeks. He looked older than I expected, gray in his hair, lines etched deep into his face. But his eyes were alert, scanning the crowd before settling on me. "You look like her," he said. "Your mother." I didn't waste time. "Why am I here? What do you want?" He sighed, his breath misting in the air. "I owe you the truth. Years ago, your mother got caught up in a financial scandal. People wanted her silenced. I helped her out of it. But in exchange, I asked her to take you. Not because you were payment, because keeping you close to her was the only way to protect you." I struggled to process his words. "Protect me from what?" "From the people who lost everything in that scandal," he said. "Your trust fund. It's not just money. It's evidence. Proof of who was really involved." He reached into his coat and handed me a small USB drive. "Don't open it while you're in the city," he warned. "It's safer if you wait." I slid it into my pocket, the weight of it far heavier than its size. "Why tell me this now?" "Because they're looking for it," he said. "And they'll come for you if they think you have it." We parted without a handshake, the cold swallowing his figure as he walked away. In the weeks that followed, I felt a shift inside me. The fear was still there, but it was no longer the only thing I felt. I started volunteering with a local youth group, sharing my story. Not the dangerous details, but enough to let others know they weren't alone if their families had failed them. I watched their eyes light up in recognition, and something inside me eased. One afternoon, a new volunteer joined us, a wiry man in his 40s with a faded baseball cap. He froze when he saw the photo of the man who'd given me the USB, which I'd used as part of a discussion on trust and secrets. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice low. "He's someone I know," I said cautiously. His expression darkened. "That man was on the most wanted list 15 years ago. Fraud, money laundering. He vanished before they could arrest him." The room felt suddenly smaller. My mind raced with the implications. What it meant for him, for me, for the USB burning a hole in my desk drawer at home. That night, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A new message from an unknown number. "You have 48 hours before they find you." The call came on a quiet Sunday morning. I was making tea when my phone buzzed, flashing Mom's name. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but something in me said to answer. Her voice was softer than I remembered. "Haley, can we talk?" We met at a small cafe halfway between my apartment and their house. Dad was there too, his posture stiff, but his eyes less guarded. Over steaming mugs, they told me they were sorry. Sorry for the secrets, for the favoritism, for the distance they had built between us. "We thought we were protecting you," Dad said, his voice low. "You were protecting yourselves," I replied. But there was no heat in my words. The anger I'd carried for so long had burned itself out, leaving something quieter in its place. Mom reached across the table, her hand tentative. I let her take mine. For the first time in months, I didn't feel the need to pull away. "There's something you should know," she said. I made a copy of the USB. It's with a lawyer I trust. If anything happens to you, or to me, it will be safe. It was both a comfort and a chilling reminder that we weren't free of danger yet. Back at my apartment, I stared at the city skyline, the winter light slanting gold through the windows. My phone buzzed again. A new message from an unknown number. It's over. For now. The words felt like a warning disguised as relief. Months passed. I finished the semester, moved into a slightly better apartment, and filed the paperwork to start a nonprofit. The mission was clear: to help young people who had been overlooked or mistreated by their families find resources, mentorship, and community. The first donations came from friends, professors, and even a few anonymous benefactors. I shared my story at small events and online, careful to leave out the dangerous details but keeping the emotional truth intact. People listened. More importantly, they responded. Survivors of similar situations reached out, and slowly the nonprofit grew into something real, something alive. One afternoon, I stood at the podium of a community hall, speaking to a group of students about resilience. As I scanned the crowd, my eyes caught on a figure near the back, tall, wearing a dark coat, a familiar stillness in the way he watched me. It took me a moment to place him, but when I did, the air seemed to thin. The first person who had ever sent me those cryptic texts. He smiled faintly, almost like a silent acknowledgement, then slipped out the side door before I could excuse myself from the stage. I finished my talk, the applause warm and real. Hope and unease mingled in my chest. Maybe the danger was truly over, or maybe it was only sleeping, waiting for the next move. Either way, I wasn't the same girl who once begged for her family's approval. I had my own voice now, my own place in the world, and whatever came next, I knew I could face it.